I stopped by for a little coffee and conversation with this man. This is Tom Hayden. And if the name sounds familiar, remember the SDS? Remember the Chicago 7? This man was all part of that scene. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you, what was it like to be an activist in the 60s?
Well, I feel like I'm an archaeological dig. You know, what decade do you want to go to? There's no answer to that question because nobody has that experience, and there's nothing like the 60s has exactly happened. Well, we were young.
How would you compare the Occupy Wall Street movements around the country to the movements to end the Vietnam War? Because that was the focus, and everybody said, okay, we understand what it's about. And here, everybody's saying, what is this movement about? Do you understand what it's about?
Yeah, I don't understand people who say what this is about. It seems almost pathological to me, almost a form of psychological loss of bearings. If you don't know that this movement is about trying to confront and end the practices on Wall Street, I can't help you. I have no idea what the problem is. It would take a moron to say they don't have specific demands because or a FBI agent, because once you get specific, you divide into smaller groups. So
exactly,
they're making a general protest against the general state of the economy and the lack of any government response thus far. It's different than the 60s because in the 50s and 60s, there was a broader middle class and there was a reasonable expectation, even if you were barred from it by racial reasons, that you would somehow break through and become part of the middle class. But since 1973, the middle class has been under tremendous stress. People doubling up to make what one person previously made, requiring two people's incomes and so on. And now this younger generation, which is in the encampments, they are facing economic disenfranchisement, just as blacks in the South faced political disenfranchisement. Mm-hmm. They can't get into the future. They can't get in. And the cost of college, when I went to the University of Michigan, it was $100 a semester. Now you're talking about going into debt for 10 or 20 years, $100,000.
And with no guarantee of ever earning that in your lifetime anymore.
Well, you know, if you don't get a college degree, you'll have less of a chance.
Yeah.
But you don't know with a college degree whether it'll be enough to pay off your debt. Well, therefore, Occupy Wall Street.
Would you say the university system and the whole thing is so out of whack, just like the rest of the country? Look at the money that's involved in that Penn State scandal. It's really two different issues, but the monies are so big for universities. They hire top professors, they pay them top dollars like superstars, and then the students have to pay for all of that.
Yeah.
And where do you think this is all going to go?
I don't know. It takes a president or a governor or a senator to stand up and say, this has to stop. It may be possible to reform the system piece by piece, like taking the proposals to control derivatives trading that were eliminated from the legislation and putting them back on the table now on the grounds that public opinion is more favorable. But that may not be enough. I mean, I don't know why somebody doesn't run for high office, and I mean high office, saying this is enough, and I'm reversing the cost of going to college. I am reversing student debt. If it costs $1,000 to go to Oxford, if it doesn't cost anything to go to the Sorbonne, why should it cost $50,000 to go to a public university and $100,000 and $150,000 to go to a private university? And I cannot visualize any gradual way to reduce the cost of going to college, which is something I focus on because it's the ticket for the next generation to the future. There's many aspects to this.
It's the ticket for the future of the country.
Yeah, I think so.
I have another question. You've had a very untraditional life. You know, you've been in the spotlight for a long time, and then you sort of disappeared. Are you making a comeback? Is there a place for Tom Hayden in this new movement that's coming forward? And if not, where do we find the next Tom Hayden?
I don't like the spotlight, and the spotlight chooses me. You don't, and they choose you for a reason, because there's some particular historic moment or crisis, and they, meaning the media, wants to select somebody that can speak in sound bites or speaks eloquently and seems to represent the new movement. And then afterwards, you used an interesting phrase, disappeared. I never disappeared. I'm the same person, always the same person. Spotlight disappeared, that's all. And I would strongly advise against selecting anybody to be the leader of this movement. It's just toxic and irrational to think that this movement has to have a leader to go forward.
Well, it's just that everybody is taught, think within the box. Somebody's got to be the leader, and then everybody else should be the followers. And they're looking around and say, I know how to be a follower, but I don't know how to be a leader. So where do we find...
Well, that's the process of self-discovery, that you have your own leadership qualities is what's going on, in addition to you know, trying to stop society in its tracks until something's done about Wall Street. In other words, we have leaderless organizations. Let me mention Alcoholics Anonymous, or all those self-help groups, and they consciously avoid leaders, which doesn't mean that they're disorganized, but I think what it means is that the collective wisdom of many generations of people fighting addiction produces an intelligence and a common leadership in the group that nobody can replace individually. So somebody might be a good speaker at a meeting, or but they're not allowed to lead, and the organization. I study it as part of, you know, social movements, self-help groups. I think it's been around 80 years, and it will continue to be. But if it had been under one leader, there would have been a leadership crisis, or he would have been caught with his pants down, or he would have been caught with his money.
Exactly.
So this is not a bad thing to have this collective process.
Well, I have two questions. One came from several of our women listeners. They wanted me to ask you what it was like to be married to Jane Fonda.
Well, that's off limits.
Okay, so then we'll move on. You see, ladies, I told you it was off limits, but no, you had to ask me. Ask them. I respect that.
I believe you made it up. I don't believe any women in their right minds would ask.
You're looking at the one behind the camera.
There you go. Yeah.
You know, and I can't say no to this lady because we've been married for 38 years. One other question, do you think America learned anything from the protest movements of the 60s?
Yeah.
And what is it you think they learned?
Well, I'm a big believer in the creation and the maintenance of norms, what we call norms. That is, codes of conduct that are not like laws, but have great force, that keep people on the street from fighting each other over the cost of a book today. The norms of behavior, and I think people became more, for example, much more skeptical of politicians. They came to realize that the government could lie, that the CIA could deceive you, that we could be assassinating people, that a healthy skepticism arose, and that's a resource that prevents that prevents us going off to war very easily. Now you'll say, well, we keep going off to war. Don't I know? I spent all my time on that subject. But my point is that it's not easy. Bush had a hard time launching the invasion. There were 100 million people around the world protesting. He had a hard time getting funding from Congress. Look, we're a superpower, so when a war starts, it's not so easy to end. But I think these norms of no more Vietnams, no more executive secrecy, no more, official credibility gaps. These norms are the great outcome. That's why opposition to wars begins on a higher plane than it would have in the 50s. My dad was of a generation that just believed whatever the government said.
Yeah, they said, my country, right or wrong, my country, you know.
It's almost the reverse now. Whatever the government says, the truth has to be the opposite.
Exactly.
It's gone too far in the other direction, perhaps, but that's the resource that the anti-war movement draws on.
And I think it's spilling over and is becoming part of this movement because if nothing else is happening, the truth is coming out. And
the truth is not only coming out, but it's becoming harder to lie.
Yeah. And you know that old saying, the truth always sets you free.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, I don't know.
But certainly, I would hope that lies get you put in jail.
I hope so. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
This was very good.
Bye-bye. In the book? No. Oh, this one is, yeah. Absolutely.
Let's do a little plug here. This is Tom Hayden's new book, The Long 60s, and tell us quickly, what's it all about?
It's part of a larger book on how reform comes about in American history. This started as a chapter, and then it became a book. It's about a completely different narrative about the 60s, about how social change specifically came about in 20 or 30 specific ways as a result of the 60s.
Well, then this is good reading if you really want to learn about history, because history repeats itself.
That's exactly
And
right.
if we don't learn something from it, we're going to make the same mistakes.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.